everyone, and welcome to Artists United Television. I'm Holly Million. I'm the founder and executive director of Artists United. We are a nonprofit organization headquartered in Oakland, California, USA, and we're working worldwide with artists in all disciplines. Our goal is to build the largest network of artists in all disciplines that the world has ever seen, and we're on our way to doing that. In just 2 short years, we have achieved nonprofit status in the United States. We have a board of 45 artists who are throughout the United States who run our organization. We have 25 different countries represented on our international program committee, and our programs have been launched. We have an online educational program which has evolved into Artists United Television. We're doing artist networking events throughout the United States and worldwide. We have had events in Barcelona, Spain, and even in Namibia and China. Our mission is to empower individual artists to create excellent art and to unite all artists to create social change. We are an artist-led organization, and our goal is the economic and political empowerment of artists, both for their own benefit and also because artists are some of the most creative people in our society, to harness the power of that creativity for social justice and social good. We have many, many plans for the future. Right now, we're building an online platform that will enable artists, no matter where they are in the world, to connect with each other and share resources. Currently, we have 32,000 people signed up as free members of Artists United. And if you'd like more information, you can visit our website at artistsunited.net. That's artists, plural, united.net. So I'm very, very excited here on this episode of Artists United Television to welcome someone who's become a very good friend of mine. And I've never met him in person, and I do hope to meet him someday. But this is the power of the age that we live in. It's the age of the internet. And thank goodness for Skype and all the other tools that we have. Karl Frisby is here with me in the studio, live from the Peach Studio in in Brussels, Belgium, where he is living. He's originally from the United Kingdom. And Karl is a member of the International Program Committee of Artists United and also the International Lab, which is the leadership team for that committee, which runs our international program. Recently, Karl very generously agreed to become the volunteer director of Artists United Europe to help pull together and coordinate all the different representatives we have in countries in Europe. And he has a long history in art and in art education. He's a writer, he's a musician, and he's also a painter. He's a Renaissance man, in other words. And
I do my best.
By day, he also is the mild-mannered international coordinator for the Lucca School of the Arts, which is in Brussels, Belgium. Welcome to Artists United Television, Karl.
Thank you very much, Holly. It's really nice to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Anything that you'd like the viewers to know?
Sure. I think it's interesting that this word international keeps coming up quite a lot. And I think I've sort of been very fortunate in my life to live a very international life. You know, I spend a lot of time living all over the world, actually, in Japan, in Italy. I'm now here in Belgium. And I was very fortunate to sort of be part of an era or an age where international travel became cheap. You know, connections between people became a lot smaller. And I think people felt more united in general. So it's with that spirit really that I do what I'm doing today, and that I want to be, you know, a leading part of Artists United. And I think it couldn't have come at a better time, because the trend that I've just described, unfortunately, as far as I can see, is slowly starting to wane, and we're starting to feel an increased tension between those who want to live globally, and by that I mean I don't mean in a globalization sense, but consider themselves to be citizens of the world first and foremost, and those who want to become increasingly insular and more isolated and closer to the people who were born in the same geographical location that they were. And you know, speaking as a Brit, and I think, you know, speaking to you as an American, I think we can probably both testify that we're right in the middle of that particular cauldron right now. And I wish I could tell you that here in Belgium it's any different, but it's not. We're starting to see a great fear of perhaps what will be the next phase of our society when we start to move towards a world in which it becomes less and less important where you were born or what language you were born speaking, or indeed,
or what color you are, or
exactly,
what gender
exactly,
you are, or what, everything. It's like it's freer.
exactly, or it has the potential to be, because when I hear you say that and I hear it echoed back to myself, it sounds so incredibly idealistic. It sounds. Whereas I think if I were to rewind and we were having this conversation, say, circa 1995, 97, 98, I think we both would have been far more optimistic, where I think we would have been in a situation where, you know,
I'm optimistic,
ra-
Carl.
I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. I'm not unoptimistic,
It's more the
but
times you're saying. You're saying,
yeah,
yeah.
I feel like we've sort of had a bit of a bell curve, really. I suppose that's what I'm saying. And I think we've come across at exactly the right moment to kind of help the curve stay on the right plateau, and not to sort of plunge back into populism and sort of petty divisions between people. So international education is really a huge part of that, and the community that exists between academics and students is genuinely global, and people are first and foremost connected by their interests. Everything else is absolutely secondary. And for that reason, I think international art education, and arts education in particular, has an enormously important role to play in terms of how society will develop and move forward. So it's very exciting for me to be in this role at Luca Arts here. Here in Belgium, I think we enjoy a fairly unique position in terms of opportunities to internationalize. Firstly, Belgium has a history of being the sort of crossroads of Western Europe. It's often described as the battlefield of Europe, because all of the major battles in European history were fought here. The Battle of Waterloo, the First World War, the Second World War. It's been a place where cultures have always crossed and met, not always for the right reasons, but nevertheless, that's been the case. And as such, the Belgians themselves are incredibly adaptable people. They're very culturally plastic and pliable. We have two distinct language groups here, three in fact, but two major ones, which means that already in Belgium, the lingua franca is English. People here speak English because half the country speaks Dutch, half the country speaks French.
They need a common language. They got to have something in common. The
Right.
lingua ingla.
Lingua ingla. And then yeah, exactly. And then we got the benefit of having, the United Nations are based here, European Union is based here, NATO is based here. It is an international place, and so for that reason, Luca Art School was already kind of ready to embrace becoming an international institution, and that makes it a very exciting place to work, because a lot of the barriers just don't exist, or are greatly diminished from where they would be. So I'll give you an example. If I were doing the same job, say in Spain or Italy, trying to find a common language between all international students would be pretty tricky, So whereas here the master's programs are all taught in English. It's just accepted that English is the global language, and therefore, if we want to write or read or engage on a global level, that's kind of the way it is. So that makes things really, really interesting.
That's very fascinating. I didn't think of that.
It's true.
If you have a country where they're already speaking multiple languages, it seems like it opens the mindset to cooperating more. And that also, it never occurred to me there was a reason why the United Nations selected Belgium to be the place where they would put their headquarters. So you're making it a lot clearer for me.
Yeah. you could arrive tomorrow and just already engage with life,
Hmm.
without thinking to learn another language. And I'm not saying people shouldn't learn other languages. I think that's incredibly expansive to the mind and the way of thinking, etc. But nevertheless, we're in this situation, rightly or wrongly, where English has become a global language. And, let's face it, compared to other languages, English is an easy language to learn. And,
If you don't have to
so
spell.
so for that reason, it's yeah, yeah, right. So it's well suited to that. And we're enjoying a lot of success with that. And I think, it's only going to continue to grow. And of course, here in Belgium, we've got a very, very rich art history going back to, the Flemish primitives and, Hieronymus Bosch, people like this, these great. I mean, in fact, the Flemish invented oil painting. They're credited with inventing oil painting. So, um, Belgium and the arts. Belgium is also very well known for being connected to surrealism through René Magritte, Ce n'est pas un pipe, all this stuff. Excuse my bad pronunciation, Belgians who are tuning in. But yeah, so for a little country, it's really it is the kind of beating heart of Europe. It is the crossroads of where various cultures have met.
That's
Um,
why I'm so excited
so
that
yeah,
you're
very
involved
happy
with.
to be here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it sounds like so exciting. You make me want to go, but I was going to say that you're making me also very glad that you're part of Artists United, and also it makes so much sense that that the director for the European program for us is in Belgium. It seems like it is the connector for Europe. And so could you
Yeah,
tell us a
undoubtedly.
little bit more about your own thoughts about arts education? Artists United has a youth committee, is what we call our youth
Mm,
program for artists 25 years old and under.
mm,
That's just slowly growing. We have that program
mm,
chaired by an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old who are on our board of directors. And we decided to do that early on in the development of the organization because we recognized that the future has to do with young people and with young
mm,
artists in
mm,
particular, and that they need extra help, but they also
mm.
have fresh minds and also fresh spirits, and that we need them to use their energy and their enthusiasm to help lead the way. So I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts about arts education and why you got involved in arts education, what you feel its value is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, firstly, for me, I think education in general, has this transformative power, and not only the power to transform the individual, but the power to transform communities. I've long been interested in the work of Paulo Freire, the great Brazilian educationalist, and this concept that education should be about social change. It should be about making life better. And I think one of the challenges we're starting to face is that education is not so much about that, and it's starting to be a little bit about, getting a certificate, or a little bit about, I have this big thing that qualifications are not skills. I think we can all, if we just reflect on our own education, and I think about when I learned mathematics at the age of 16, 17, 18, I was actually pretty good at it. I did very well at school. If I now try to conjure in my mind, how to solve a quadratic equation or something, it ain't there. But I've still got the certificate, I've still got the certificate.
You could say
And the
quadratic
certificate,
equation. I haven't said those words in about 30 years. That's pretty good.
exactly. And the certificate still has currency. That's a strange thing, even though I still don't have the knowledge, the certificate has currency. And I think we're in a situation now where we need to start recognizing that um, age is not necessarily some badge of competence. And I think for too long we've kind of held this idea that, if you're over 25 or over 30 or over 40, somehow this is a badge of competence and gives you some sort of skills that people under 25 just don't have, and that poor them, and we need to help them along. And I think the reality is the world is changing so fast that quite often people are under 25 are the ones most in touch with what's happening and how things are changing. If you look at history of the arts, you look at the great movers and shakers, the people that have dynamically shifted art forms. They've nearly all been under 25. It's so. I think in the arts we need to recognise that we can't keep having this institutional mentality of saying, I'm more experienced than you because I've lived the same year 20 times.
Hmm.
If you did live 20 different years, that's something different. And I'm not saying that cannot be a badge of competence. It really can. The right person who's
But
really developed
it's
themselves
not de
and studied.
facto, right? It's not a
Exactly.
guarantee. Yeah, you have to show us what you've done.
Yeah, right. But be judged on your merits. And the problem with this mentality is it's led to a world where all too often young people, and particularly students, are exploited for the skills and talents they have. And, quite often I'll walk through town and I'll see a sign that says something like student wanted. You can almost read between the lines, very competent person who will accept no money wanted. This is the kind of what it's really saying when it says student wanted. And, I believe that if the quality of the work is good enough, the pay should be commensurate with the quality of work, not nothing else. If you're willing to use what they've done, then they should be paid the same as anybody else would be paid. But that's my feeling. And we're now in a situation in Europe, and I think it's far worse than it is in the United States, where we've got almost a quarter of our youth population unemployed.
Same here.
Yeah, so you've got a situation where people have almost got nowhere to go because we've made education impossibly expensive. We've made access to employment incredibly difficult. We've made the reality of having a sustainable home and life very challenging. And we've sort of put young people in this, for want of a better word, I don't know. I don't even know what people tell themselves. It's like they have to earn the right to have any sort of quality
You
of
have to
life.
prove yourself first. Isn't that the phrase? You
Right.
have to prove yourself first.
Something like that, isn't it? I mean, quite what people who were lucky enough to be born when houses were cheap and now own 10 of them proved to do that, I don't know. I mean, as far as I can tell, they just happened to be born before property was commodified.
Well,
But
they got in early on the Ponzi scheme known as
yeah,
society and the
right.
economy, and they got in early. That's how Ponzi schemes work. Those who get in early
Yeah,
get out with a lot of stuff, and those who come in late have nothing, and they
yeah,
give
that's
all they
right.
have, and they get nothing. So it's really a Ponzi scheme if you get down to it.
That's
And,
literally what's happened.
and I think we're
And
seeing that with
fortunate,
Brexit and other things that
and how sad that we're using our youth of the lowest level of a multi-level marketing scheme. I mean, what kind of messed up world is that? So I mean, that's one of the challenges I think young people face, and I think they deal with it incredibly well. I mean, almost too well. Sometimes I'd like to see a little bit more revolt and a little more
I think that's coming.
anger.
I think it's
I think
coming.
it's inevitable. I think, unfortunately.
When you have nothing, you've got nothing to lose. That's like the old song says. It's true, and we pretty much have put young artists in a situation where they don't have anything to lose. So
No,
it does tend to encourage people to revolutionize things.
yeah. I mean, let's hope that will be the case. I mean, I really, I hope it can happen in a way that's sort of non-violent and can, but you can't keep backing people into corners and expect that eventually they will. And as we compete more for resources, and I think it's inevitability. So that's one thing, and I think it's a challenge that we really have to face. I mean, in Spain, for example, the level of youth unemployment has been as high as 35%. Uh, that can't be tolerated. At some point, as a society, we have to say this is a lost generation. This is it's unacceptable. We can't continue like this.
Except Carl, isn't it true that we could say those things, but it's really the answer to the problem lies within the art field and also within the youth artists. themselves. Isn't that true? I mean, to some degree, isn't it possible that their choice to use their power as artists might be part of the solution, or their choice of revolutionizing through the way that they choose to use their talents and skills? Or is that asking too much, really?
I think it's incredibly difficult, isn't it? I mean, we've seen that. We've time and time again through history, we've seen social revolution that's been driven in part or largely by the arts. I mean, I think the civil rights movement in the United States would be a good example of that. I think it reached a point where, you could only listen to so many Ella Fitzgerald, Chuck Berry records until you eventually said to yourself, well, hang on a minute, why don't black people enjoy any kind of social equality? So I think there's definitely a case to be made for the transformative power of arts globally. I think it's a real challenge for young people because the world doesn't work in the same way. Obviously, with the advent of the internet, we've created what's, in a sense, an infinite repository for artistic creation. And it's just never going to fill up. It's not like a John Lennon situation where you can sort of say, well, this person's just going to keep building on their own shoulders, because the capacity to just reinvent society endlessly is there in a superficial way. So it's a big challenge. But I mean, that's certainly one thing, and I don't really have any solid answers for that. But it does make me ask the question: what are we educating people for? And the second thing that I want to talk about is who are we to determine what we educate them with? And, what puts us in the position to say that we know what art is and that we can communicate that and that we hold the keys, So, I mean, I think in some subjects like music, for example, there are some very objective criteria by which you can sort of say, well, you need to understand chord structure and harmony and, the stuff that can be taught that's not subjective and just it's the tools of the trade. To a lesser extent with painting and, let's say, sculpture, and even to a lesser extent with, say, video art or something else. And I think one of the challenges to international education is to take that problem and then even say, well, which culture holds the keys? Which culture has the right to say, we're the dominant paradigm of artistic...
Well, no culture really has the right to say they're the dominant paradigm of anything,
no.
Frankly. It's all subjective. No. And the other thing you're making me realize, and I have always felt this to be so important, is so many art schools, doesn't matter what discipline. My background's in film, so I know film schools quite well. They don't teach anything about the practical aspect of being an artist and making a living. So there's never any... film students learn about film theory and some of the technical aspects of filmmaking, but they don't learn anything about how to negotiate a deal, a distribution deal, or how to create a structure for their, like an LLC, to be the business entity for their filmmaking, or how to negotiate the terms of how they're paid. And I think that's true in other art fields as well, that we're not teaching them about the business of making a living as an artist, or how to demand certain minimum standards of how you're treated or paid. So I feel like the revolution in part, and part of our responsibility if we're people designing art education programs, is to acknowledge that that's been missing, and that in fact, in order to strengthen the artists, we have to include that kind of information. Do you have that at Lucas School of Art, or what are?
The thing is that this sort of area has always been traditionally picked up by things like student services, which is they get involved with that. I think the biggest problem is this, that there's almost like a sort of Masonic structure to arts as a business, right? It's almost like a sort of need to know basis. So it's kind of like the secrets of the deal are revealed if you reach that point,
That's
and then somebody,
ridiculous.
but it does seem to go, it does
No, it
seem to
is.
go like that,
I'm
and it
laughing
shouldn't be
because you're
like
like,
that.
you put your finger right on it. It's like, I need a secret handshake or sign or
Yeah.
something to get in the
Here's a
door.
pub. This is what publishing rights means,
Oh my
sign
God.
here.
It's a sheaf of wheat.
Uh,
Oh my God.
and so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if, I mean, it almost sounds like I'm saying there's a deliberate conspiracy to sort of keep this stuff
You begin to wonder after
hidden.
a while. You do.
But, I mean, I think we all know so many people that have fallen foul of bad deals and
All the time.
all the time. So
They're like
why is
innocent.
that?
They're so innocent. There's no information. That is exactly why Artists United exists. And we formed this organization to empower artists. We knew that artists had the resources and the information within themselves. In fact, it was because I worked for 20 years as a filmmaker and had developed deal memos and contracts and budgets and so many
Mm,
other tools that nobody gave me any instruction on those things. I had to go figure it out. And I knew how much
mm,
work it took. And I said, if I could give these things away, it would enable somebody else to skip over those steps and just begin making films rather than having to figure all of the secrets out. So
yeah, yeah.
that's why we exist, is to help make that exchange possible. So it'd be lovely for us to work with Luke of the School of the Arts and help connect the artists with what we
Yeah.
have.
I mean, it was something I was very attracted to when you first approached me and we started talking because, yeah, it's something I find myself doing, kind of ad hoc mentoring of people. But in terms of formal structures, it's not there. And it makes me think of one last point that I wanted to make, and I know we're getting a bit pushed for time, is the artistic development and growth is not something that can be easily quantified in terms of numbers of weeks or numbers of hours or numbers of years. And yet the education system, works in such a way as to sort of say, well, you've got 3 years during which you will obtain this situation. And that can be very problematic for some people and very easy for others. I mean, for myself, it was a really problematic thing. I was incredibly fortunate to have a really terrific mentor in my first year at university, and he was a little bit like one of these characters from a movie, and he was almost like, it was almost like being the Karate Kid of painting, because I remember
Or
the guy
Dead
would come
Poets
in.
Society. You remember that one?
No, he was a bit harsher. I mean, I'll tell
Oh,
you the
okay.
story. He would sort of come to my studio every day and, just lavish praise on me. I mean, he would just spend hours there, really loved what I was doing, encouraged me, helped me grow, showed me things. We read together. It was fantastic. He even took me out for dinner because he thought I was anorexic, because I just one of these naturally really skinny people. And anyway, at a certain point, he comes in the studio and I'm expecting my usual sort of basking in glory, morning. And he just says to me, when are you going to stop making this shit? Like, this is just, and I was just like, whoa, where did that come from? Excuse me, am I not allowed to swear on
You're
this?
you're
But that's a
you're allowed
direct
to
quote.
swear when something like that happens. Wow, he
And
sideswiped you. He completely set you up and then he cut your legs out from under you. That's horrible.
I really, first, I was just like, my whole world fell apart. But subsequently, he was right. It led me into stop uh, being so overly precious about what I was doing that, I'd become a slave to my own idea.
And also the
And
praise. You were a slave to the praise too. So you were generating what you thought would generate praise, right? So in a way,
exactly,
he forced you to go within and say, what do I really want to create? That was brilliant
right,
in a way, although meanly
brilliant.
done. But
And he told me like a year later that when David Hockney had been at the school, he had done the same thing to him. It worked
well,
out better for David Hockney than it did for me, but nevertheless.
but you're in good company.
Um, so it set me into a bit of a tailspin that lasted till the end of my degree. And 3 years was not enough for me. I needed more like 15 years. So it's another really big question, that if somebody taps into something deep enough, it's a lifetime of study.
It,
And to just cut them off at 3 years and make a decision,
I,
it is a kind of nonsense, really.
it is a kind of nonsense, but there's so many things that are a kind of nonsense, and what we have to elevate. And what is great about this conversation is that anybody who's listening, who's an art student or who wants to be an art student, is just starting the process. The most important thing to realize is art school is just a small piece of your process, and that it's not going to give you everything that you need, and that you're going to end up having to essentially teach yourself through living and
Yeah.
life and creating, and you will learn to find within yourself what you need to express, and you won't need to worry about what people think about it. And so you will be a lot more
Yeah.
resilient. You won't have anybody kicking the stool out from under you, right?
That's right. And not to live with this idea that kind of somebody's flipped an egg timer and when it runs out, your chance of becoming an artist is finished.
No.
Because, I mean, and this is, kind of almost a final point that I wanted to talk a little bit about the progression from university. And, I'm also somebody who's a great believer in this idea of a universal basic income, and something particularly for art students, but also students of all kinds, to be able to enjoy a little bit of respite, to actually take in what they've learned and apply it in some way before they find themselves working a 40-hour week at McDonald's, and they're just lost into, life is what happens to you when you're making other plans, as John Lennon said, and I think, young people now really need to be getting behind this concept of a universal income, because as far as I can see, it should be an entitlement to the generations that are coming through now. If the sort of baby boomers insist on sort of hoovering up the world and pulling up the ladder, I think the minimum entitlement people can expect is some standard of living guaranteed by the system.
I think, Karl, that we should have a second. I wanted to have you come back several times on this show because there's so many topics we could talk about. I'd love to have you come back and let's talk about universal basic income, because it's a theme that's coming up multiple times. It's come up with the board of directors of Artists United, and it's so important. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it additionally at some point, but we're running out of time for today because the ideas are so rich, and I just love talking to you. I could talk to you for hours and hours on end.
Yeah.
And I know you're in the middle of the
Likewise.
Black Forest there, and the light's getting a little dimmer. It's like very dark in the
That's right.
Black Forest, although it's peach
The,
right
the
now.
trolls are going. The trolls are going to come and get me.
The gnomes and the trolls and all those good little creatures. So,
the internet trolls probably.
is there any final thing you want to say just before I close the show?
Firstly, I mean, really, just to say, it's a real great pleasure to be part of this, and I'd encourage people to watch all of the episodes, because the other people that you're interviewing, I've been had the privilege of spending time with them on the various committees and boards of Artists United, and I think there's some wise people with a lot to contribute. So yeah, thanks for having me as part of this, and I look forward to the next episode.
I think there's some multiple future episodes, and I know that viewers will enjoy hearing about your recent trip to Russia and the work that you were doing there. So we'll have some more information to share.
Yeah,
But I want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank all the viewers who are looking at this video today on Artists United Television. And just to close out, I want to say again, Artists United is a worldwide movement of artists in all disciplines, the largest movement of artists ever seen, currently with 32,000 members worldwide. And we are here to empower individual artists to create excellent art and to unite all artists to create social change. We have a motto at Artists United, and that is: artists who work alone create art, artists who work together create change. And we are slowly and surely building and demonstrating daily how artists can help each other and also have an impact on the world. If you'd like to get involved with Artists United, you can donate to support our cause. And we are a 501c3 charity in the United States. We can accept contributions, and you can donate online at artistsunited.net. That's artistpluralunited.net. We also need volunteers. We have a board of directors in the United States that has openings for people that want to serve directly. If you'd like to represent a country, one of the countries worldwide, and start an Artists United chapter, you can do so. Just let us know. And if you'd like to be on Artists United Television, that's also a possibility. The application process is very simple, isn't it, Karl?
Oh, yeah.
So please do visit artistsunited.net. Thank you all for viewing. And Karl, thanks for joining us today. We look forward to having you again sometime soon.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks, Karl. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
From the north to the south, to the west, to the east, to the bottom, to the middle, to the top. 7 connections to 7 directions. 7 connections.